Hey folks, welcome back. In this lesson, we are going to talk about lifecycle hooks. So in the DevOps doctrine, let's click on the lifecycle hooks button. Now, before we get started, let's get a little background on lifecycle hooks. Like, what are lifecycle hooks? So oftentimes these services come about to solve a problem. Now, the problem that you may run into is when you're deploying instances, usually you're deploying applications on these instances. And these things take time. Some applications are going to take longer to deploy than others. So we're getting into a timing situation which could pose a problem without lifecycle hooks. Now, if you're just running a simple PHP application, you may never run into any problems. The application is going to deploy pretty quickly. But you may be deploying more complex applications, maybe Java with Tomcat or .NET applications. And these applications are going to take longer to deploy. So what's the problem? Well, what happens is that our auto-scaling group and or our Elastic Load Balancer, when we launch an instance, the auto-scaling group or Elastic Load Balancer may see the instance as healthy and start serving traffic to the instance. Meanwhile, our application is not ready yet. It is still loading. Installation is still going on, and it's not ready to serve traffic. So there is the problem. It's a timing issue. If you're deploying applications that may take several minutes to deploy. And that's where lifecycle hooks come into play. And it's just important to realize that an instance does not necessarily wait for the application to be ready before registering as healthy. All right, now this all sounds promising, but what do lifecycle hooks do? In a nutshell, what they do is they pause the state of an instance. And this pause gives the application time to load on the instance and become ready, and it avoids the issue of the instance registering as healthy and being served traffic before the application is ready. So, have a little bit more detail on this. Let's click on the Lifecycle Hooks Transitions button. So, when an instance launches, its lifecycle is pending. Pending wait, pending proceed, in service. Likewise, when an instance is terminating, its lifecycle is terminating wait, terminating proceed, terminated. And again, the problem we're running into is that our instance may register as in service before the application that's being loaded on the instance is ready. So, if we add a lifecycle hook, the lifecycle hook is going to hold this instance in the pending wait state, and the default is for 60 minutes. And we'll get into a little bit more of that a little bit later. But it's holding the instance in this pending wait state and run custom actions. Well, what are custom actions? Could be your bash script, load your web server, install your Java application. And let's just, as an example, say that this all takes 10 minutes. Most likely, your instance is going to register as in service before your application is ready. And that's a problem. So that's where the lifecycle hooks come into play. Now, lifecycle hooks can also be used for a scale-in event. So let's say a scale-in event happens, the auto-scaling group begins terminating an instance. And this can all happen terminating wait, and proceed to terminated within just a couple minutes. Well, what happens if you want to do something that's going to take more than a couple minutes? A good example would be downloading log files. So you're trying to download log files, and all of a sudden the instance is terminated, and you'll just get booted out of your terminal session if you're downloading from a terminal. We can apply lifecycle hooks to our instance. The lifecycle hook will hold that instance in a terminating wait state. Again, using the example, we download our log files, and then it's okay to proceed with termination. Again, the default for this this pause is 60 minutes. Probably in most cases don't need 60 minutes. We'll see how to resume the process in the next lesson. This is going to be a two-part lesson. And just to be clear, you're not limited to any specific type of situation. Again, custom actions. So really, anything you would need to do before an instance goes in service, or in a case of scale-in is terminated, you can apply a lifecycle hook to the instance. Now, some of the things that can be done, and there's really a lot of flexibility here, is we could use a CloudWatch event to invoke a Lambda function. So our autoscaling would submit an event to CloudWatch, and then the event would invoke a Lambda function. The Lambda function can retrieve information about the instance and a special token to control the lifecycle action. Now, the event that can be sent to CloudWatch could be an instance launching or an instance terminating event. Now, a good example of this situation using CloudWatch and a Lambda function is, so when an instance launches, let's say we want to add an elastic network interface to this instance. Well, we could use a Lambda function to facilitate this. So the Lambda function would make some API calls, get our elastic network interface, and apply it to the instance. And all of this could happen while your lifecycle hook is holding this instance in a pending wait state. So your custom actions can be very simple or they can be complicated, but the process using the lifecycle hook is pretty straightforward. Another thing we can do with lifecycle hooks is when we have a launch or a terminate event, we may want our support team to be aware of this. So we could use a notification target for the lifecycle hook, and we can send messages to endpoints such as SNS or SQS. And again, using the specific example, maybe we just want our support staff to be aware of scale out, scale in events. We could send an SNS notification using lifecycle hooks. All right, so this all sounds great. But let's talk a little bit about this pending wait state. Again, the lifecycle hook is going to pause the instance in this pending wait state. Now, the default wait state is 60 minutes. In most cases, your custom actions are going to complete before 60 minutes is up. So what do? Rather than just have this instance pause for 60 minutes, that's a waste. Well, you can perform the complete lifecycle action CLI call, and we'll see this in part 2 of this lesson. But doing complete lifecycle action will allow the instance to proceed to in service. And remember, CLI commands are great for scripting. So in your custom action, when everything you need to do is completed, you could add the complete lifecycle action to your script. And I realize this is a lot of theory, but we'll see this in action in the next lesson and also in an upcoming learning activity. Now, conversely, what happens if you need more than 60 minutes? So if we need more time to complete the action than the wait state timeout gives us, we can submit a heartbeat. And the CLI command is record lifecycle action heartbeat. And this will give us additional time for our custom actions to complete. Okay, so that's some detail on how lifecycle hooks work. This lesson was very theory-based, but in part 2 of the lesson, we're going to get into some hands-on work with lifecycle hooks, and it definitely will tie everything together, and we'll see lifecycle hooks in action. So let's complete this lesson and move on to the hands-on lesson.